Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nijinamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastatare Shatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasudi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So Madhurya Kadambini is a short work written by Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur in prose rather than verse, and its main element is a description of the progress of bhakti from Shraddha to Prema, which is based upon, we can say, the incident of Narada Muni and how he advances after hearing from the sages and then develops taste, etc. And then he eventually gets Bhava and Prema in the first canto of Bhagavatam. So this is one of the, maybe the few works which gives details of these different stages which are mentioned by Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Devotion. So Madhurya Kadambini means, Kadambini means a bunch of clouds. So this is a sweet bunch of clouds. And the clouds refer to the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the clouds, what do? Is they sprinkle water. So each chapter is called a vrishti, or a shower, just as in the Nectar Devotion, which is a Sindhu. It's an ocean, so it has waves in it, so each chapter is a wave. So here we have each chapter is a shower. So, here's a little introduction here. The introduction is actually in verse form. The great sweet cloud of unlimited mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu nourishes the seeds of bhakti planted in the heart. So generally we get Guru Krishna Prasadya by Bhaktivedanta Beach. We get the mercy of Guru and Krishna, but here so you need the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also. Even by approach of the clouds of mercy, the heat of rasa is dissipated in the universe like a river becomes joyful in expectation of the rain. So the jiva is considered to be living in the desert like that. And he considers himself also to be like a dried up tree in that desert, and then he wishes for the rain to fall, the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to fall, so that his bhakti creeper can grow very nicely, like that. So, and once the rain falls, of course, then we get the growth of the plant. So the first chapter is, we can say, the introduction, in which he introduces the Lord and bhakti, which is non-different from the Lord, as distinct from other processes which are definitely associated with the modes of material nature, whereas bhakti is beyond the modes of material nature. So he begins by actually going back to Shruti. That is, here he quotes the Taittiriya Upanishad to indicate that actually whatever he's going to speak has its basis in the Shruti, not just Smriti, but actually in Shruti. So therefore, Shruti means the Vedas, which are distinct from things like Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavata, which are called Smriti. Not because we consider Shruti superior, because conventionally people consider the Shruti to have more authority, and particularly Shankaracharya will only admit Shruti, and Smriti only if it agrees, he'll make it agree with the Shruti. So he'll interpret Smriti in terms of Shruti. And of course there are groups, if it was Arya Samaj, I think, they don't accept anything except Shruti. That's a modern day movement, of course. So anyway, he quotes from Shruti to establish the idea of rasa and bhakti. So this comes from the Taittiriya Upanishad, Rasa Vaisaha. He, the Lord, is rasa, and attaining labva, I am rasan, a person becomes blissful, anandi bhavati. A person becomes blissful on attaining that rasa, attaining the Lord who is rasa. So by realizing the Lord, we realize rasa of the Lord. And then we get bliss. So there is two things here. One, the Lord is rasa, and the Lord is bliss. So his bliss arises from rasa. And if we experience the rasa with the Lord, then we get the bliss. In the Nectar devotion, the first verse, we have the introduction to the whole work, which is all about Bhakti Rasa. Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu. So again, rasa is the emphasis in that book as well. And most of the whole of the Nectar devotion is about rasa. Of the 4 parts, 3 parts, the later 3 parts are about rasa. The first part is introduction that gives 3 types of bhakti. So it's also basically about rasa. So there, the very first verse, he indicates that Krishna is the very form of all rasas. Akila Rasamrita Murti. That is Krishna. So of course all of the forms of the Lord are one. We can't differentiate them. But Krishna manifests all of the rasas, whereas other forms do not manifest all the rasas completely. So what are all the rasas? All the rasas are 5 primary and 7 secondary rasas, which may operate in different ways with different persons, and usually one person will have one primary rasa and maybe a second primary rasa which is subservient, and then periodically the secondary rasas manifest. Krishna manifests all these rasas in the most spectacular way, and he can even do it simultaneously. So here is a verse from the Bhagavatam where Krishna enters the arena of Kamsa. And there are all different types of people there. And they respond to him in different ways. Some with a primary rasa, some with a secondary rasa. So we have the wrestlers. They saw Krishna as a lightning bolt. So generally Krishna is very soft and tender as the petal of a lotus. But suddenly when the wrestlers saw him, he was hard, tough. So this expresses Virya rasa. Krishna in relation to the wrestlers in relation to Krishna. He was an equal competition for them. So Virya means, of course, courage and things like that. Fighting rasa. The men of Mathura saw him as the best of males. They were astonished by his beauty and his qualities, etc. Astonishment of Abhuta rasa. The women, young women, saw him as Cupid, personification of Cupid, that is Madhurya rasa. Cowherd boys saw him as their relative, that is Sakya rasa, as their friend, and they joked with him. That's called Hasya rasa. The impious rulers, that is the friends of Kamsa, saw him as a chastiser or a punisher. So they looked at him and they thought he was very angry. Rodha rasa. Vasudeva and Devaki and Nanda Maharaj saw Krishna as their child. That is Vatsalya rasa, and also Karuna rasa, which expresses pity, because Krishna looks very weak and the wrestlers are very strong, so they have this idea of compassion for Krishna. Kamsa saw him as death. That's fear rasa, bhayanak rasa, secondary rasa. The unintelligent saw him as the material body, and they express disgust, which is called bibhatsa. The yogis saw him as the absolute truth, shanta rasa, and the Vrishnis saw him as their worshipable deity, dasya rasa. So we get all of the primary and secondary rasas manifested in these different persons, like the wrestlers here. So, the next topic, of course, is after Krishna is established as the source and manifester of all the different rasas, is to explain about bhakti, which manifests by the Lord, but actually controls the Lord, which is very remarkable because the Lord is the supreme controller. But how can bhakti control him? So the explanation, of course, is bhakti itself is part of the Lord. And therefore, part of the Lord controls the Lord. There's no contradiction. So arises from his Sarup Shakti, or internal energy, Chit Shakti. And actually is composed of Hladini and Samvit Shaktis, that is Bhakti. So it's part of the Lord, intrinsic to his nature. And is considered to be the best part of the Lord also. And therefore, you can control him because it's part of Krishna and it's a superior part of Krishna. So therefore, no contradiction if we say Bhakti controls Krishna. So, that Bhakti, of course, manifests within the material world. By the Lord's will, whenever he chooses, he can manifest that Bhakti, just as the avatars come by their own will. They're not forced to come by circumstances or anything. When the Lord wants to, he will appear in the material world. However, that Bhakti manifests in the devotees. Then we'll say, well, why not in everybody? Just like the rain cloud is merciful and it doesn't distinguish between dry, good ground and bad ground or whatever. It falls everywhere. It nourishes the plants and it falls everywhere. It doesn't distinguish. It will only fall in one place. So how is it that the mercy of the Lord ends up in the devotees and not in others? And the answer is that, as we see from Bhagavad Gita, the Lord is equal to everyone, but he is very attracted to his devotees. He is in his devotee is in him. So there is a partiality of the Lord for the devotee. So is that a fault or not? And the answer is no. Why? Because the devotee has bhakti, and the Lord is attracted to bhakti, which is part of himself. So therefore, there's no problem in that. If he's attracted to himself, what's the problem? So he's attracted to the devotee because the devotee has that bhakti, which is part of his Sarup Shakti. So where it appears the mercy goes to the devotee. What type of devotee? So of course all devotees get, but also as in proportion to the quality of the devotee, the Lord responds. So therefore, the greater the devotee, obviously, the more mercy is there. Of course, Krishna can make exceptions and give mercy to the demons also, like Putana or Aghasura. But in general, there's a correspondence between the intensity of the devotion of the devotee and the mercy of the Lord. However, the mercy generally falls to the Madhyamadikari, because he is the one that gives out the mercy. So this is where most of the mercy ends up. It goes to the Madhyamadikari, and then the Madhyamadikari distributes that to other people. He gives the devotee the power to distribute that mercy also. So he doesn't make the devotee do anything. He gives them the mercy and the bhakti, and he says, okay, do whatever you want. So he gives independence to the devotee. The devotee can choose where he wants to get the mercy. And again, we say, of course, the devotee is like a rain cloud, etc. But again, there is particular places where the rain falls more, the mercy goes more, and other places less. This is the Madhyamadikari. So, the Sarup Shakti of the Lord descends to the Madhyamadikari distributes that to other people. Why the Madhyamadikari? Because this is the definition of the Madhyamadikari. The Madhyamadikari recognizes the Lord and is favorable to the Lord. He is a friend to all the devotees. He recognizes the significance of the devotees and respects them all. He shows mercy to the ignorant or the neutral people, innocent people. And he disregards or avoids those who are hostile or envious of the Lord. So this is the conduct of the Madhyamadikari. So he's friendly to the devotees and shows mercy to the ignorant. That's his quality. Huh? So, we we see that Lord Chaitanya has emphasized this giving out of mercy. Yes, in this verse, whoever you see, you talk about Krishna, you give teachings about Krishna. So, and the Guru is one who has accepted Krishna as his Guru. So, in this way, we could say it's coming from Krishna actually, but it's going through the devotee, and he distributes that mercy to others. So it's not just the devotee giving out mercy, it's the Lord's mercy that he's giving out. And what is a Kanishta? A devotee who faithfully engages in worship of the deity in the temple. Acharya Mevahare Pujamya. He is very faithful to do puja to the Lord in the temple. But he does not behave properly towards the devotees or people in general. So, he doesn't have faith in them. So how can he preach? He has no interest in devotees, he has no interest in other people, so he can't be a preacher. He doesn't want to give out mercy. So that's basically, yes, the Lord gives mercy to him, so he has some bhakti and whatever, but he has no real interest in preaching, so therefore it doesn't go to him. What about the Uttamadhikari? The most advanced devotee, Bhagavat Uttama, sees Supreme Lord, one's object of worship, within everything and sees everything in the Supreme Lord. So therefore, unlike the Madhyamadikari, he doesn't differentiate and say this person is ignorant, this is a devotee, this is a non-devotee. This is all Krishna, all devotees, everybody a devotee. So why do we have to preach? Even the asuras are devotees of the Lord for him. So he's got a vision, of course, it's maybe we could say maybe unrealistic in some sense when he sees the demons. Oh, they're also devotees. But that's his bhava, his such, he's overcome by such love of the Lord that everything is related to the Lord somehow or other. He finds connections, even for the demons. So therefore, the necessity to preach is also not so great in there. We do have exceptions, of course, like Narada Muni. So he's famous as a great preacher. Of course, he's also Shaktavesh avatar, and he's empowered with bhakti, so obviously he would be a preacher. So we get examples like that, but generally the higher one goes and begins to experience the rasa with Krishna, and then he's more or less participating in that rasa most of the time, and he disregards the material world completely, and he sees everything in terms of prema, as we see in Puri. When Lord Chaitanya would look at the cloud, he would see Krishna. When he looked at the sand dune, he would see Govardhan like that. So he's rather unaware of the physical situation of the world. So that is the, and then he would enter into the pastimes of the Lord. So this is the Uttamadhikari. So the Madhyamadhikari is not at the stage of having such intense realization, and therefore he can look at the world and analyze it in terms of normal perceptions and see devotee and non-devotee and innocent person and different types of devotees, etc. So he is the one that's mainly the distributor of the mercy of the Lord.
This Mahabhagavats, or Bhagavatas, generally we have seen that in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Parampara, since Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Lord as well as he came in the form of a devotee, so he is like Mahabhagavat also. So since Mahaprabhu majorly, although except the few years in Puri, at the end he was only experiencing the prema. However, the most portion of his life he was like, and he also instructed that we should give out the mercy. So generally even the Bhagavad Uttaras in the Gaudiya Vaishnava line, all the Acharyas, Rupa Goswami and all the others, they are more wanting to distribute the mercy than to experience prema. So how do we understand that?
Well, as I said, the general tendency of Uttamadhikari is he's more or less, absorbed in prema and less in, so that's a general characteristic, as there are exceptions to the rule. And of course, then Lord Chaitanya has also emphasized the preaching aspect. So in that sense, even the Uttamadhikaris would be inspired to preach, etc., in spite of their internal, they would sacrifice that for preaching work. So that's also there. We see in the case of persons like the Goswamis, they kind of became intermediate, kind of. So they were absorbed in prema, etc., but then they also absorbed themselves in preaching in the form of writing works. They weren't going around like Nityananda preaching everywhere, but they were absorbed in writing works because that was the order of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So on his order, they did that. And similarly, we have great acharyas like Vishnu Chakravarti, Baladev Goswami, did a lot of preaching in that sense. So in certain cases, yes, they will sacrifice something in order to do their job of establishing bhakti and preaching bhakti in the world. On the other hand, then we do find the other persons like the Babajis, more or less not interested in preaching. So we have Gorkishore Das Babaji and Jagannath Das Babaji. How many disciples they had? One. So they were obviously not interested in making disciples or whatever like that. So they're mainly interested in cultivating there. Of course, we can't say they're Uttamadhikaris or whatever, but at least they're on that path of concentration on the Lord, dedicating themselves to that. So we get the two streams: the Gosyanandi, who's the preacher, and the Bhajananandi, who's the interested in his bhajan also. And within the Gaudiya Sampradaya, we get the two aspects there as well.
Prabhupada, what is the meaning, Maharaj, like when he says that Bhajanandis are, like when Gosyanandis are better than Bhajanandis, like when Srila Prabhupada says that, so what is the understanding behind it?
Well, in the sense that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu encouraged that the preaching mode, as he said, we go everywhere and preach. That was his order, so therefore we follow that order as much as possible. But there's also the individual nature as well. So some people may prefer this other one, this to just cultivate their own. It's like, what happened here? And I was trying to get into that file, and here we are. Yeah, well, because I went into the wrong file, actually. I should have another file. It's nothing new, it's the latest one, but then the latest one didn't show up anything for some reason. Oh, here we are. Okay. I have two forms of this, and this is the more complete version, which is a little bit strange. Okay.
Individual mood marriage, which you were saying, so like usually the mood gets developed through hearing, like the Sarupa gets developed through hearing. So like how this individual, because if Mahaprabhu says that like preaching is what he likes, then how would the other group, the Bhajanandis, would develop their mood? Because they would generally hear the pastimes of the Lord. So how that particular mood will come?
Of being preaching.
Bhajanandi.
Well, we can say it's like something like Rupa and Sanatan and others. They kind of went middle way, and they would preach a little, but they get absorbed, and at certain times they cannot suppress that type of feeling as well. I think I've got the wrong one still for some reason here. Maybe I'll go into new one instead. I thought it was the opposite. We'll try this one. It's probably going to end up the same. Oh, this one has 54 slides. This is the good one. This is the one. It's got double the amount of slides in it. Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, even more rasa. Okay, anyway, we'll cover that. Okay, anyway, we get more pictures also. The wrestlers, the people of Madhurya, the young women, the cowherd boys, Rodha Rasa, seeing as a child, Bionic Rasa, Disgust Rasa. Disgust Rasa actually is the priests of Kamsa. When they saw Krishna, Krishna entered the arena and he had killed the elephant and he put his tusk on his shoulder so he had blood on his body. So when the priests of Kamsa saw it, they looked at him with disgust and said, how can such a contaminated person come in front of Kamsa? So that's the disgust rasa, bibhasa rasa. And of course, the yogis saw him as in Shanta rasa. So even with Krishna, some people, they see him and they say, oh, he's so peaceful like Brahman. So they see his Brahman aspect more than his aspect as Supreme Lord. And the Vishnu saw him as Supreme Lord. Oh, there's another verse there that is quoted also. Brahmano hi pratishtaham. I am the basis of Brahman. So just because previously Vishnu Chakravarti quoted Rasa Vaisaha, he is Rasa. And this is bliss. So therefore, the Brahman, which some people say is bliss, is actually inferior, and Krishna is the source of that bliss or the basis of that bliss. So in this way, he doesn't talk about Brahman, he only talks about Supreme Lord, who is superior in bliss. Okay. Okay, so the bhakti is independent, it appears by the Lord's will, it's not dependent on anything, and it falls upon his devotee. We've covered that, okay? We have the Madhyamadikari, we have the Kanishthadikari, and we have the Uttamadikari. This is from Jiva's commentary. One should see all beings as having prema for the Lord, absorbed in the Lord who appears in their mind. So when he sees anything, it's, everyone has prema. One should contemplate the mode of the Lord within oneself as being present in all living entities. Such as, and he gives the example of the gopis who were, whenever they saw a tree, they said, oh, the tree is serving Krishna, or the river is offering lotuses to Krishna, etc. The rocks are, weeping for Krishna. So they see everything in terms of Krishna. So therefore the Madhyama is usually considered to be the primary deliverer of the souls, and ultimately then we say the Madhyamadikari is the guru for everybody. But then I said exceptions are there. So Narada Muni makes distinction. This is a quote from Bhagavatam. I cannot be attained by yoga, sankhya, charity, vows, austerity, sacrifices, explaining the Vedas, study of the Vedas, or sannyas. Karma yoga, that's the blue part. And we have karma yoga with a little bhakti. If you do karma yoga with a little bhakti, you can get Svargaloka or wherever you want in the material world. If you do it without bhakti, you don't get anything. Karma yoga, no Supreme Lord, no worship of the Lord, no respect for the Lord, failure. It's no good. Disastrous results. So in that sense, it's dependent on bhakti. If it's got a little bhakti, then why don't we call it bhakti? Well, it's got a little bhakti, that's why. And it's mainly karma yoga, and the goal also is not to fall in love with the Lord, it's to attain Svargaloka, so therefore it's very, very secondary, so we call it karma yoga. But it should have a little bhakti in it.
How is it called as yoga itself? Because it does not have any element of Krishna or Supreme Lord, then how is it yoga?
Well, yoga can mean simply a method. Yeah? In common usage, yoga just means method. Yeah? So we got karma yoga, jnana yoga, stanga yoga, bhakti yoga. It's method or practice. Jnana yoga, with a little bhakti, and you accept the Lord and don't offend him, you can get moksha. If you offend the Lord, no moksha. You fall from your position. As is said in the Bhagavatam. Again, one falls down into the material world, even though you think you're liberated. So that's no respect for the Lord. If you respect the Lord, then the Lord is merciful and he gives you liberation. So in other words, liberation and even Svargaloka ultimately depend upon mercy of the Lord also. But again, it's a little bit of bhakti. So they recognize the Lord and they do a little worship. But primarily they're interested in liberation. And their main sadhana is jnana. So bhakti yoga can give all those things. Whatever karma yoga can give, bhakti yoga without karma yoga can give Svargaloka. Bhakti yoga without jnana or yoga can give liberation. But more than that, it can give you the spiritual world, the spiritual body, and prema, etc. That's something that the other two cannot give. So whether one does or not, other processes or not, bhakti yoga can give everything. And therefore it's called Chintamani. It gives everything, anything you want. Everything that can be achieved by karma, penance, jnana, vairagya, mystic yoga, charity, dharma, and all other auspicious means of perfecting life is easily achieved by my devotee through bhakti. If somehow or other my devotee desires svarga, liberation, or residence in my body, he achieves such benediction. So, completely independent of any other process. Bhakti is independent of physical or mental purity. So you can do it even if you're not physically pure or mentally, if you're mentally disturbed or whatever. Which is not so for other processes. If you're going to do sacrifices in karma yoga, you have to have purity and whatever like that. If you're going to study Vedanta, then you have to have mental, physical purity, and you can only study at certain times. There's all sorts of conditions attached to karma, jnana, and yoga. In Bhagavad Gita, we see in chapter 6 description of the yogi, a very general description. Then you have to find the right place and the quiet place and put down a deer skin and a kusa mat and do all this. There are particular things you have to do for yoga, jnana, and karma. Of course, jnana and yoga generally only reserved for Brahmins and people in sattva gun. And even in Varnashram, those who are mlechas and chandalas cannot participate in Varnashram also. So there is Varna restrictions also. Not so for bhakti. So no consideration of Varnas, birth, gunas, etc. And in any state of mind one can practice bhakti. At any time, in any place. One's internal purity and purity of place and materials are indispensable for accomplishment in karma, jnana, and yoga. Definitions, these areas obstruct progress on those paths. So there's a very, very great insistence on purity there. Internal purity, external purity. Like that. And bhakti is not even dependent on faith. You usually say faith is a qualification for bhakti, so not even faith, in the sense that if you utter the name of the Lord or do accidental bhakti, it has some effect. So as in the case of Ajamil, he named his son Narayana, and then what happened? All of his karmas were destroyed. And he had no faith. Of course, there the condition was no offenses also. So therefore, that's why all of his karmas got immediately destroyed. So even without faith, one can accidentally do bhakti, and it has some good effect. Not only chanting the holy name, there's also stories of how the rat or the mouse was hungry and went into the deity room, and there was a wick, ghee wick there, and it was kind of sputtering and almost lit, but not quite, it was flickering, so it couldn't light up the deity properly. And the little mouse got hungry, so he was nibbling at the wick, and maybe tasting the ghee, and then it burst into flame and it burned him up. But in bursting into flame, it lit up the deity. So that was service to the Lord. So the mouse went to Vaikuntha. So that's an example of accidental bhakti of lighting up the Lord, doing arti for the Lord or whatever. And so even then we have cases of, not only with chanting the name, but with other processes of bhakti also. Great power. Which is not so with these other processes. Accidentally, you can't do jnana and all this. It doesn't work. Everything has to be particular. We see in the case of the sacrifices, if you make a mistake in the mantra, just a little mistake, no wrong effect like that. So everything has to be done very, very particularly. Now, so bhakti is preeminent. It's the best part of the Hladini and Samvit Shaktis of the Lord. It's all-pervading like the Lord. Everywhere, it goes everywhere in the material world. I think in the explanation of the Chatusloki Bhagavatam there's a very, very nice explanation that bhakti is everywhere, at all places, and all times, etc. So, from Patala Loka to Brahma Loka, up until spiritual world, bhakti is there, all places, and all times, from birth to death, of course. Even when you're dying, you chant the holy name or whatever like that. And from the beginning of the universe to the end of the universe, throughout every day of Brahma, bhakti is there. So it pervades, and also in the spiritual world pervades at all times. So at all times and all places, bhakti is there. So it's all pervading. Totally independent, as we see, it gives results of everything. Self-manifesting, that means it's like Krishna himself. It doesn't depend on anything. It's not created at any point in time. It doesn't depend on anything else. It's part of Krishna's Swarup Shakti. Life-giving. So it gives life to karma, gyan, yoga, etc. Is of the same nature as the Supreme Lord from whom bhakti emanates. So the bhakti Shakti, as I said, was Hladini and Samvit Shakti, which is the best part, or the sar, the essence of the internal energy of the Lord. If one still prefers a process other than bhakti, that person should be considered bereft of the power of good judgment. Since it is the best, why do we want to do something other than bhakti? And bhakti is like equal to Krishna. So he ends this by saying, Ko vaina sevita vina naretaram. Who except an animal would not serve the Lord? So that's the first chapter, which is, let's say, the introduction. I would say Shraddha, maybe we can say.
Last time you spoke about accepting Shiksha Guru. You had told that one mentally accepts Shiksha Guru, surrender. But we've also heard that the Guru and the disciple, both of them accept each other. So when we are accepting someone as Shiksha Guru, shouldn't Shiksha Guru also accept as a disciple?
Well, yeah, he accepts in the sense that he teaches, otherwise he can refuse to teach.
Oh, Ekalavya and...
And so he accepts them and he teaches them. He agrees to teach. So that's his acceptance when he agrees to. Of course, in the modern world, it's a little strange because we have tape recordings and all sorts of things like that. So he can do without acceptance. But previously, that always was there, that you had to go to the person, and if you didn't speak, then you wouldn't get the teaching. So if he taught, then he would mean he accepted you. He thought you were qualified to hear.
Then accepting Prabhupada as preeminent Siksha Guru, is that valid when we say we are accepting Prabhupada as Siksha Guru?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's there's two types of Shiksha Guru. There is the founder of the movement or founder of a sampradaya. He's the preeminent Shiksha Guru. And then we have the Shiksha Gurus who we generally consider the living persons who teach the instructions. So two types. So in that case, obviously, he cannot give permission but we can say his permission is given in the sense that he wrote the books for everybody in the future also. So therefore, he's teaching all the persons. So in that sense, he's giving permission.
Maharaj, you spoke about purity. Bhakti does not depend on purity. What does purity mean, Maharaj? Internal purity or?
Well, internal purity obviously means that, for instance, to do jnana and yoga, you have to be sattvic, a sattvic mind, very calm inside, etc. Like that, have qualities of sattva. Bhakti, tamagun, rajagun, sattvagun, anyone can start the process. Of course, by doing bhakti, one becomes purified. But it's not an initial condition, a certain level of purity. And even in the varnas themselves, Vaishya, Kshatriya, and Sudra, then, which are defined by gunas, they're allowed to do certain things, other things they cannot do. So there's different rules for the Sudra, different rules for the Vaishya, different rules for the Kshatriya in terms of their sadhana or whatever they can do. So in other words, they are dependent upon the purity, and the more pure you become, then the more things you can do until you become sattvic and brahmana, then you can do everything. And then we have physical, of course, is obviously cleanliness. So there are rules for cleanliness of body, and for objects, and for place. And these have to be intact in karma yoga, jnana, and even in sangha yoga. If the purity is not there, then failure of the process.
And Archana also.
And time also, purity of time.
Archana would be considered purity, no, Maharaj?
Yeah. So that's an exceptional case in bhakti, where archana requires some level of purity of body and mind. Of course, the mental purity, we could say, is guaranteed by the fact that you take diksha, and therefore you have to be at a certain level before the guru gives you diksha, which means you're qualified as a fixed devotee. And if you're qualified as a fixed devotee, then technically you surpass the gunas anyway. So that's the qualification there.
Like in the initial stages or like accidental performance of bhakti doesn't require any sort of purity, etc. Yet when the devotee wants to advance and receive the bhava and prema, then he has to also work on the pure utterance of the holy name, for example, and in fact also mental purity. Like he also starts, like we have 4 regulative principles, for example. So he would not break them, because we can't say that if he is breaking, then he will also still receive, because Krishna, there are several instructions in the scripture also, so he has to follow the scriptural instructions gradually. So maybe in the very beginning he is not, the bhakti is not dependent on this all purity, but then within the process of bhakti itself, the recommendation of purity, etc. will come. So he
well, we can say in an opposite way that the purity is created by the process of bhakti itself. Not that we first have to get the purity, then we can perform the process. So naturally the purity results from the process itself. For instance, people may not follow all the regulated principles, but they can still perform bhakti. And by doing it, then eventually they follow the regulated principles. So they manifested that level of purity by the performance of bhakti. So it's not necessary that first you have to follow regular principles, then you can do bhakti. It's not that way. That's the idea there. It's not that there's no concern for purity, but it's a natural result. Just like jnana is a natural result, or vairagya is a natural result of bhakti. But they're not angas of bhakti. We don't cultivate detachment. It's a natural result of bhakti. We become detached from everything. And of course, it's very good, because the more we're attached to Krishna and less we're attached to material, it's a sign of our advancement.
The natural evolution of this purity or detachment, etc., like how would it happen to a devotee? Like would it not be he sees that some attachment or some impurity as something which is blocking his progress to go towards Krishna, and like that it will happen. Means it's a conscious endeavor or choice which he has to make. It's not like unconsciously happening. That's the question which I was asking. Because when sometimes we use word natural, so then the devotee will feel like, okay, I can be casual, and it will anyway happen. So is it not like he is choosing more purity and more detachment?
Yeah. Well, I think the main aim is to attain bhakti. And in pursuance of bhakti, then we have standards of purity or regulations, etc., to support that. So the main object is not the purity itself. The main object is more attraction for Krishna, more bhakti, and in pursuance of that, then we can set certain standards for ourselves. Because we're going through the process of anartha of vritti from the beginning all the way up into bhava stage, it's not going to be perfect also. So we can also fail. And we can break our vows or whatever, and it's somewhere, anywhere along the line. So it's not infallible. Still, if it's not a constant affair of falling and breaking principles, etc., then it doesn't really impede the process of bhakti. By continuation, then the tendency for anarthas gets less and less and less.
Somebody vowed to the spiritual master that he will follow 4 regular principles and chant 16 rounds, and then he does not do it. So not only now it's sin, but it's actually offense now. So would that not block his progress? Like, okay, sin will not block bhakti.
Well, chanting 16 rounds is a type of vow, but that's a bhakti. It's part of bhakti itself, isn't it? A vow of bhakti. So that part is a little bit different from the regular, let's say, rules of purity or whatever like that. The other ones, 4 regulated principles or whatever, they may disturb his bhakti, but they don't destroy his bhakti by any means. If he stops chanting, of course, then his bhakti gets diminished or destroyed. So there's 2 different vows there. One is a vow which isn't part of bhakti in the true sense, it's more like dharmic, and the other is the vow to chant 16 rounds or whatever like that, which is a bhakti vow, anga bhakti. So of the 2, the bhakti vow is more important to follow, and the other one is the natural result of that, and therefore if you take initiation, then at that point one doesn't have difficulty in following those vows. So then, in that sense, it's manifested through the process of bhakti, what's come to that level of not being attached to those things. But because we do have anarthas, even then, one may fall from those principles or whatever.
Is that not an offense if you fall?
Well, in one sense, but it's not so serious as the non-performance of bhakti. Because all, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, abhichet suracharo, even if you get the most sinful activity, if you continue the process of bhakti, then you're still my devotee.
Also, like Maharaj, the process of bhakti is independent of other processes, etc., and also of requirements of such purushcharya or purity, impurity, etc. Yet, the practitioner of bhakti may not be independent of all of this. Like the process of bhakti is independent, but the practitioner may also have to consider favorable and unfavorable. Because, like, for example, Varnashram is not required for bhakti, but then when Varnashram is there, like the proper situation of his livelihood, his lifestyle, etc. is there, so then that would be more favorable for his bhakti.
So then you can do those things. But it doesn't absolutely depend on it. So therefore, if those rules are available, follow them. If he's not in the Varnashram society at all, then he may not follow them. He doesn't even know what they are, the rules are, and still he can progress. So it doesn't act as an impediment, but it could be very favorable in many cases because it helps sense control or whatever, and it supports his family or whatever like that. So definitely it can be done.
Like without that, like most of the people may not be able to even practice the bhakti steadily.
Well, Bhaktivinoda Thakur analyzes in terms of rules for the body, rules for the mind, rules for social interaction, like that. So those rules, we don't have rules for that in bhakti itself. So we borrow from the Varnashram system for those rules of cleanliness, etc. Basically, we take those rules in a simplified, modified form.
Any other questions?
Maharaj, when we tell that only generally a Madhyama is the one who preaches, is that a Madhyam Adhikari or Madhyam Bhakta, Maharaj?
Which Madhyam Bhakta meaning what? It's not, this is the one referred to in the Bhagavatam in the 11th canto where I gave those definitions. The Kanishta was one who sees the deity in the temple but doesn't recognize devotees. And then the Madhyama sees 4 types of persons, interacts differently, and the Uttamas in Prema. The other category is made by Rupa Goswami in Nectar Devotion concerning Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, whether we have the Kanishta who has Komala Shraddha. So that's a division of faith, Komala Shraddha, and then the one who has faith but not too much knowledge, and then one who has Prodha Shraddha and deep knowledge of Scripture. That's all within Vaidhi Bhakti, Sadhana Bhakti. Whereas this other definition goes up into Prema, Uttamadhikari's Prema there. In the Nectar Devotion, that Uttamadhikari is only doing sadhana bhakti. He's not even on Bhava stage. He's just has deep knowledge of Scripture and deep faith. So there's 2 different, definitions given.
So what is the exact difference between Adhikari and Bhakta, Maharaj?
Well, Adhikari means one who is qualified. A qualified person is a Madhyama or whatever like that. That's all it means.
Another question? Any other question? Raise your hands.
Maharaj, you told that Jnana Yoga doesn't result anything and Jnana Yoga involves some Bhakti Yoga, then only it will give liberation. Means like, so when they perform Jnana Yoga, they'll also get some Bhakti feeling or nothing like.
Well, if you just do Jnana, no, because Jnana, by Jnana we mean here cultivation of knowledge of the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutra for impersonal goal. So generally they will reject the Lord there as being Maya and concentrate on the formless Brahman, especially the Mayavadis. So that type of Jnana becomes an insult to the Lord because they reject the form of the Lord and say it's material. So therefore they can't get liberation. So the Jnana does not necessarily lead to liberation. The only way a Jnani can go to Bhakti is by association with devotees. But if he's a real Jnani in the Mayavad sense, he will avoid the devotees. So we just know that chance.
This Isha Yoga and things like that, they do qualify like a Jnana Yoga.
Isha Foundation.
Oh, that's more or less impersonal. I don't know whether he's a Mayavadi or just an impersonalist, but basically most of these yogis are impersonalists. Meditate and merge into Brahman, which is formless, etc. Whether they reject the Lord or not, I don't know. Some of them may, but generally Mayavadis will say the form of the Lord is Maya, so therefore they can't get liberation. Other people, they may accept the form of the Lord, therefore they could get liberation if they progress and get His mercy.
Like there is another very specific variety which we can see nowadays also, like in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time also, which is Shankara Mat and Chaitanya Path. So they accept all the practices of Bhakti, but the goal is still merging into Brahman. So what is that?
Well, yeah. No, that's the Panchapasana and all of that. So that again is, that's the Smartas, I think, do that. But again, it's ultimately impersonal. See, so they accept the forms of Durga and Shiva and Vishnu and Ganesh, is it? Surya Dev, but not as absolute. They're material forms. And then they reject those forms ultimately.
Like they want to be merging into Brahman.
Yeah,
They want to
yeah.
become Rama, for example. Like somebody may be
Yeah.
chanting Ram's name, but then he may want to become Rama. So like that is also like liberation only. Right? It's not Bhakti.
Yeah.
But then such people, like we saw that the Bhakti performance was very little in Gyan Yoga.
Yeah.
But these people externally practice a lot of Bhakti. Like chant the names of Rama, etc.
Okay. So but if it's based upon the idea that it's all false, then it's offensive. So when I say they have to have a little bhakti, that means they do accept the form of the Lord, worship of the Lord is very, beneficial for them, and it's not Maya. Then they can get their liberation.
And these Gyan Mishra Bhaktas, like when the impersonal conception they have given up, and now they are understanding the form of the Lord, but still they receive only Shantarati, Shantarasa they receive. So how does that happen? Whereas why they don't go to the active service?
Well, if they do the bhakti but they still have this tendency to long for that peaceful existence of Brahman. It's kind of a mixture because of the influence of the so many years of practicing and meditating and doing all this, and they get interested in this peaceful aspect. Even if they accept the Lord, that kind of influences them, so it prevents them from going further and serving the Lord. So they prefer the Shanta aspect, and that's what they get.
Though they may be associating with devotees who may be preferring higher rasas, or like they may be actively serving.
Well, maybe they'll change and then they'll give up and they'll do pure bhakti without a mixture. But I'm saying if they continue all the way up until the highest levels of still preferring that Shanta, then that's what they get.
One can maintain one's conception, though the association may be there. Like that's what you're saying.
You could, but hopefully it would disappear. And we have examples like Sukadev was a Brahmavadi, but he got the mercy of Vyasadeva and Krishna, so therefore he became the highest bhakta. He completely transformed. There was no mixture at all in his bhakti after that.
Four Kumaras, however, they only got the Shanta. Four Kumaras.
Well, they're eternally, there was no sadhana, they're the eternally empowered with that Shanta to distribute jnana to people.
Any other question? Anyone else? Okay. You'll have to ask little loudly. This one. You have to ask loudly. This one come.
How does the Bhajananandi channelize the quality of compassion towards other living entities? Because of course if they are practicing devotional service, this quality of compassion will develop to such an extent. So how do they show and channelize this quality of compassion?
We can say it's like the Uttamadhikari. The Uttamadhikari sees everybody as great devotees of the Lord and all engaged in service. We can say that's his compassion, his vision that everybody's wonderful. Everybody's the highest devotee.
These devotees.
Or we can also say, like, how do the gopis show compassion to others? They're not going out preaching, like they see everything is related to Krishna.
So they are compassionate in the sense that they show the highest example of absorption in Krishna.
Yeah. And they see everybody as being a very great devotee and whatever like that.
Maharaj, if the four Kumaras, they are in Shanta Ras, then how is it that the Nimbarka Sampradaya is said to be leading us to Radha Krishna? Because they are
I believe there is a story that then they attained some higher realization of Radha and Krishna. There's a Sanat Kumar Samhita or something there, and in that Sanat Kumar is talking with Shiva, and they're talking all about Radha and Krishna. So apparently at least one of them developed a realization of Radha and Krishna. So that Sampradaya, they actually worship Radha and Krishna.
So also like there is a song that says Sanaka Sanatana Vandita Charite, Radhe Jaya Jaya.
Yeah.
So they are like describing the glories of Radha and
Yeah, I think that's because of the Sanat Kumar Samhita, I think.
So like they associated with Lord Shiva and they got a higher rasa.
Yeah,
Like that.
yeah, something like that.
Very good. Any other questions? His Holiness Bhanu Swami Maharaj ki Jai. His Divine Grace Sri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.